Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and thank you for tuning in today because what you are about to hear may completely change the way you look at the smallest coin in your pocket, the humble American 1 cent, because hidden behind its ordinary copper surface lies a story so unbelievable, so shocking, and so potentially life-changing that collectors around the world still whisper about it with a mixture of excitement, disbelief, and obsession. And today we are diving deep into the mysterious legend of the 1978 no-mint mark 1 cent USA coin, a penny that on the surface looks just like millions of others but under the right circumstances has been linked to values reaching an astonishing $23 million. And this is not hype without reason, not a fantasy, but a powerful combination of rare minting errors, production mistakes, historical timing, and collector psychology that together create one of the most fascinating modern coin stories ever told. Because the year 1978 sits at a critical point in American coinage history when the United States Mint was struggling with aging equipment, experimental metal compositions, rushed production schedules, and inconsistent quality control, all of which opened the door to extraordinary errors slipping through unnoticed and into circulation. And when we talk about a no-mint mark penny from 1978, we are specifically referring to coins struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not use a mint mark during that era, meaning billions of pennies look identical at first glance, yet within that ocean of copper-colored discs exists a microscopic number of coins that were struck under abnormal conditions, and those conditions are exactly what can transform a 1-cent coin into a multi-million-dollar artifact, because value in the world of rare coins is not determined by age alone, not even by condition alone, but by rarity multiplied by demand multiplied by story, and the 1978 no-mint mark penny has one of the most compelling stories of all, starting with the errors themselves, because some of the most valuable examples are believed to have been struck on the wrong planchets, including experimental bronze compositions left over from earlier years or transitional metal blanks that were never meant to be used, creating pennies with unusual weight, color, magnetic properties, and sound. And when a coin is struck on the wrong metal, it becomes an instant anomaly, something that should not exist. According to official mint records, and collectors pay enormous sums for coins that defy documentation, because they represent mistakes the system failed to catch. And beyond wrong planchet errors, there are double die obverse and double die reverse varieties where the design appears doubled, sometimes dramatically so in the date, the word liberty, or the motto "I in God we trust." And unlike common machine doubling, true doubled dies are created during the hubbing process and result in crisp, raised, duplicated details that cannot be faked easily. And when such doubling appears on a year like 1978, where high-quality examples are rare, the value can skyrocket exponentially, especially if the doubling is bold and visible without magnification. And then there are off-center strikes, where the coin design is misaligned and part of the blank remains unstruck. And while minor off-center coins are fairly common, extreme off-center strikes combined with a full visible date and strong strike can become extraordinarily valuable, particularly when paired with other errors, because collectors prize coins that show the minting process gone wrong in dramatic fashion, and the 1978 penny is known among specialists for producing some remarkably misaligned strikes due to worn collars and loose dies. And speaking of dies, die cracks, die breaks, and retained cut errors are another pathway to massive value. Because as dies deteriorate, they begin to crack and chip, leaving raised lines and blobs of metal on the coin, and some late-stage die break errors from 1978 show massive retained cuts that distort Lincoln's portrait or swallow parts of the lettering, turning the coin into a one-of-a-kind sculptural object. And when such a coin survives in high mint state condition, untouched by circulation, the value leaps into a different universe entirely, because condition is the amplifier of rarity. And a rare error in poor condition may be worth thousands, but the same error in pristine, uncirculated condition can be worth millions. And that is exactly where the $23 million valuations come into play, because the coins associated with these extreme prices are not ordinary circulated finds. They are museum-quality specimens graded by top third-party grading services with near-perfect surfaces, blazing original luster, and razor-sharp details, often discovered in sealed mint bags. estate hoards, or forgotten collections where they sat undisturbed for decades, and another critical error category involves blockage strikes, where a previously struck coin becomes stuck to a die and impresses its mirror image onto the next blank, resulting in a ghostly, inverted design on one side, and blockage errors from the late 1970s are especially prized because they represent split-second failures in the minting process that are almost impossible to replicate intentionally. And when such an error occurs on a year already known for other anomalies, it creates a perfect storm of desirability. And then there are strike-through errors where foreign materials such as grease, cloth fibers, or metal shavings interfered with the strike, leaving voids, distortions, or unusual textures. And while many strike-throughs are subtle, some 1978 examples show dramatic missing details that tell a vivid story of chaos on the production floor, and collectors love coins that tell stories. Because every error is a frozen moment in time, a snapshot of industrial failure turned into accidental art, and one of the most controversial and fascinating possibilities tied to the 1978 no-mint mark penny is the rumor of experimental strikes linked to composition testing, because during the 1970s the mint was under pressure due to rising copper prices, and although the major composition change did not occur until 1982, there is evidence that testing and experimentation occurred earlier. And if even a handful of 1978 pennies were struck on experimental alloys never officially released, their existence would represent a breach of documented mint policy, and coins that contradict official records are among the most valuable objects in numismatics, because they force historians to rewrite what they thought they knew, and that alone can push values into the tens of millions when wealthy collectors compete to own the ultimate conversation piece. And competition is another major factor driving the $23 million figures, because at the highest levels of collecting, money becomes almost irrelevant, and ownership becomes about status, legacy, and exclusivity, and when 2 or 3 elite collectors want the same unique coin, prices can explode far beyond traditional valuation models, and the 1978 no-mint mark penny sits at the intersection of accessibility and mystery. Because it is theoretically possible for anyone to find one in circulation, yet practically impossible to find the right one, and that dream fuels constant searching, because hope is a powerful engine in collecting, and every time someone finds an ordinary 1978 penny they wonder, what if this is the one? What if this coin has the hidden error that could change everything? And that psychological element cannot be overstated, because stories of life-changing finds drive demand not only for the coins themselves but for the mythos surrounding them, and myths, when rooted in truth, become incredibly valuable, and while skeptics may dismiss multi-million-dollar penny valuations as exaggeration, history has shown time and again that coins once considered trivial later sold for staggering sums when the right combination of rarity, condition, provenance, and timing aligned, and provenance is another key element here, because a coin with documented history, known discovery circumstances, and public auction records becomes more than metal, it becomes a cultural artifact. And if a 1978 era penny were to be traced back to a known mint employee hoard, sealed government storage, or a famous collection, its value would multiply again. And then there is the global factor, because American coins are not only collected in the United States, they are coveted worldwide, and international collectors often bring fresh capital and new perspectives that reshape markets, and a legendary modern era like this appeals across borders because it combines modern familiarity with extreme rarity, making it accessible in concept but exclusive in reality. And when we talk about possibilities, we must also talk about undiscovered varieties, because it is entirely plausible that the most valuable 1978 penny has not yet been found, still sitting unnoticed in a jar, a drawer, or an old roll, because history is filled with examples of extraordinary coins discovered decades after their creation, and the longer time passes without a definitive catalogue of all errors, the greater the sense of anticipation becomes. Next, 1999 mint mark D 1-cent USA coin, a penny that most people have seen, spent, and ignored without a second thought, yet under rare and specific circumstances has been associated with values reaching an astonishing $14 million, a figure that sounds impossible until you understand the powerful combination of minting mistakes, transitional era anomalies, production pressure, and collector demand that surround this coin, because the year 1999 was a period of intense activity for the United States Mint as it prepared for the new millennium, faced enormous demand for circulating coinage, and operated at full capacity across multiple facilities, including the Denver Mint, identified by the D Mint mark, and when mints operate under pressure with aging equipment, rush schedules, and massive output goals, the likelihood of errors increases dramatically. And it is precisely these errors that formed the foundation of the 1999 D Pennies' legendary status, because value in modern coins is not about how old they are but about how rare their mistakes are, and the 1999 D penny exists in the billions in normal form, yet within that vast population exists a microscopic number of coins that were struck incorrectly, incompletely, or under abnormal conditions, creating anomalies so rare that they become the holy grail for collectors. And one of the most famous and valuable error possibilities linked to the 1999 D penny involves mule errors, where the obverse and reverse dies from different coin types are accidentally paired together, and while mule errors are already among the rarest mint mistakes, the idea of a Lincoln cent obverse being struck with a mismatched reverse during the high-speed production era of 1999 pushes rarity into an almost mythical category, because such an error requires multiple layers of failure within mint protocols. And when one escapes detection and enters circulation, it becomes an instant legend, capable of commanding multi-million-dollar valuations if authenticated. And beyond mule errors, there are dramatic double die varieties that can appear on the obverse or reverse, especially in the date, Lincoln's portrait, and inscriptions, and true double dies created during the hubbing process show strong, raised, well-defined doubling that cannot be dismissed as mechanical vibration. And a bold double die 1999 D penny in pristine condition would be a cornerstone piece in any elite collection, and when such a coin is unique, or nearly unique, competition among top collectors can drive prices to unimaginable heights, and another major contributor to the $14 million discussions is the possibility of off-metal strikes, because during the late 1990s the mint was producing multiple denominations simultaneously using copper-plated zinc planchets. And mistakes involving wrong planchets slipping into the cent presses were rare but not impossible, resulting in pennies struck on foreign coin blanks, experimental alloy blanks, or even planchets intended for other denominations, and such coins often exhibit incorrect weight, unusual thickness, altered sound when dropped, and abnormal coloration, and when these characteristics align with verified mint errors rather than post-mint alterations, their value explodes, because they represent coins that should never exist according to official production records. And collectors pay extraordinary sums for contradictions to the historical record, and the 1999 D penny is also associated with dramatic die breaks, die clashes, and retained cut errors, because as dies wear down under constant high-speed striking, cracks form and pieces break away, leaving raised blobs and distorted shapes on the coin's surface, and some known late-stage die break errors from this period are visually stunning, transforming Lincoln's portrait or parts of the lettering into abstract forms that make the coin instantly recognizable and unforgettable. And when such an error is extreme, clearly visible, and preserved in mint state condition, it transcends novelty and becomes art, and art commands premium prices, especially when it is accidental and unrepeatable, and strike-through errors further add to the range of valuable possibilities, where grease-filled dies or foreign materials interfere with the strike, leaving missing details, ghostly outlines, or textured surfaces. And while minor strike-throughs are relatively common, dramatic examples that affect large portions of the design are much rarer, and when combined with other anomalies they create compound errors that collectors prize above all else. And another layer of fascination surrounding the 1999 D penny involves the copper plating process itself, because these coins are zinc cores coated with a thin layer of copper, and plating errors can result in exposed zinc, bubbles, peeling surfaces, or uneven coloration. And while many plating errors are minor, extreme examples where large portions of the copper layer are missing or malformed can become highly collectible, especially if they demonstrate clear mint-caused defects rather than environmental damage, and the most valuable examples are those that show dramatic visual impact while retaining sharp underlying details, indicating the error occurred during production rather than after circulation, and condition once again plays a decisive role. Because a rare error in circulated condition may be worth thousands or tens of thousands. But the same error in pristine uncirculated condition, with original mint luster and no handling marks, enters an entirely different valuation category, and the coins associated with multi-million-dollar figures are almost always top-graded specimens authenticated and encapsulated by respected grading services, because at that level trust and verification are essential. And provenance becomes critical, because a coin with documented discovery history, known chain of ownership, and public auction exposure carries a credibility premium that can add millions to its value, and when a 1999 penny error is tied to a sealed mint bag, an original roll, or a long-held collection assembled before the error was widely known, it strengthens the case that the coin is genuine and unaltered, and beyond the technical aspects there is the psychological power of the millennium itself. Because coins from 1999 carry symbolic weight as the final issues of the 20th century, and symbolism matters in collecting, because humans attach meaning to dates, transitions, and milestones, and when a rare error coin coincides with such a moment, it gains an additional layer of desirability that cannot be quantified purely by rarity charts, and this symbolic appeal attracts not only traditional numismatists but also investors and trophy collectors who seek iconic objects that represent turning points in history. And when multiple buyer groups converge on the same ultra-rare item, prices can escalate rapidly, and this is where the $14 million figure becomes plausible, not as a standard price but as a peak valuation for the most extraordinary example imaginable, the kind of coin that checks every box at once: extreme rarity, dramatic error, flawless condition, strong provenance, and perfect timing. And it is also important to understand that such valuations are often driven by competition at the highest levels, where a small number of ultra-wealthy collectors are willing to pay almost any price to secure a unique piece, because ownership becomes a statement of prestige and dominance within the collecting world, and in such arenas traditional price guides become irrelevant, replaced by private negotiations and record-setting auctions, and the 1999 penny occupies a unique position because it is modern enough to feel familiar yet rare enough in its error forms to feel unreachable, creating a powerful tension that fuels ongoing searching and speculation. And every time someone checks their change and sees a 1999 penny, the possibility, however remote, sparks imagination, and that widespread awareness keeps demand alive, because even if only one coin is truly worth millions, the story itself elevates the entire category, and history shows us that many legendary coins were once dismissed as impossible until they were found, authenticated, and sold. And the continued discovery of new errors in modern coinage suggests that the story of the 1999 penny may not yet be complete, because undiscovered varieties could still exist, waiting quietly in collections or forgotten containers, and the longer such possibilities remain open, the stronger the mythology becomes, and mythology in collecting translates into value, because people are willing to invest in stories that capture imagination as much as metal. And as we reflect on this remarkable coin, it becomes clear that the true power of the 1999 mint marked D1 lies not just in copper and zinc but in the convergence of human error, industrial complexity, historical timing, and relentless curiosity, and it reminds us that even in a modern, highly controlled production environment, perfection is elusive, and it is precisely in those imperfections that extraordinary value is born. Next, 1984 No Mint Mark 1 cent USA coin. We are uncovering another astonishing story that proves unimaginable wealth can hide inside the most ordinary object you have ever touched, a simple American penny. And as you settle in and listen closely, remember that this story is not about fantasy or exaggeration but about how mistakes, errors, and tiny moments of failure inside a massive industrial system can transform a 1-cent coin into something whispered about in hushed tones among elite collectors, because today we are diving deep into the legend of the 1984 No Mint Mark 1 cent USA coin, A penny struck at the Philadelphia Mint that under extremely rare and specific conditions has been associated with jaw-dropping values reaching as high as $22 million. And to understand how such a number can even be mentioned in the same sentence as a modern penny, we must journey into the heart of how coins are made, how things can go wrong, and why collectors are willing to pay fortunes for those mistakes. Because the year 1984 occupies a unique place in American coinage history, sitting just after the major composition change of 1982 when pennies shifted from solid copper to copper-plated zinc, and during this transitional era the mint was still fine-tuning its processes, dealing with new materials, unfamiliar behaviors of zinc cores, and ongoing wear and tear on equipment that had not been designed for such high-speed, high-volume production with layered metals. And this created the perfect environment for errors to occur, some minor and common, others so extreme and rare that they would later become legendary. And when we say no mint mark, we are referring to the Philadelphia Mint, which produced an enormous number of cents in 1984, meaning that at first glance these coins seem anything but rare, yet rarity is not about how many were made. It is about how many were made wrong in a very specific way, and one of the most famous and valuable errors tied to the 1984 penny is the dramatic double die obverse variety, particularly the strong doubling visible on Lincoln's ear, a variety so striking that it has become iconic among collectors, because unlike machine doubling, this doubling is the result of a misaligned hubbing process that permanently altered the die itself, producing crisp, raised, duplicated details that appear on every coin struck from that die. And when such a coin is found in pristine, uncirculated condition with blazing original luster, it becomes one of the most sought-after modern-era coins in existence. And while many examples exist at lower grades, the finest known specimens occupy an entirely different universe of value, because condition multiplies rarity, and rarity multiplies desire, and desire multiplied by competition is how values climb into the millions. And beyond doubled dies there are off-metal strikes that push the boundaries of what should be possible, because in the early years of copper-plated zinc cents, the mint handled multiple types of planchets simultaneously, and although strict controls were in place, history shows that wrong planchets occasionally slipped into presses, resulting in pennies struck on foreign blanks, experimental alloys, or even leftover copper planchets from earlier years. And a genuine 1984 penny struck on a solid copper planchet or an experimental metal would represent a direct contradiction to official mint documentation, and coins that challenge the historical record are among the most valuable objects in numismatics, because they force experts to ask uncomfortable questions about what else might be missing from the archives. And such coins are pursued aggressively by top-tier collectors who value uniqueness above all else. And then there are dramatic die breaks and retained cut errors, where the die itself begins to fail after striking hundreds of thousands of coins, cracking and breaking in ways that leave massive raised shapes on the coin's surface, sometimes distorting Lincoln's portrait or swallowing entire sections of lettering, turning the coin into a one-of-a-kind piece of accidental sculpture. And when these errors are extreme, visually unmistakable, and preserved in mint-state condition, they become trophies, not curiosities, because they show the minting process pushed to its limits, and strike through errors add another layer of intrigue, where grease, debris, or foreign material interfered with the strike, leaving missing details, ghostly impressions, or strange textures that tell a silent story of chaos on the production floor. And while many strike-throughs are subtle, the most valuable examples are those that dramatically alter the coin's appearance while still showing sharp underlying design elements, proving the error occurred during striking and not later damage. And plating errors are especially important for 1984 pennies, because the copper plating process introduced an entirely new category of defects, including bubbles, blisters, peeling copper, exposed zinc cores, and uneven surfaces. And while minor plating flaws are common, extreme examples where large sections of copper are missing or malformed can become highly desirable when clearly caused by mint errors rather than corrosion, and the most valuable plating errors are those that present dramatic visual impact combined with full original detail, creating coins that are instantly recognizable and impossible to ignore. And at the highest level of value discussion, the $22 million figure is not about average error coins, It is about the most perfect storm imaginable, a coin that combines multiple errors, such as a strong double die with an off-metal strike or an extreme die break, preserved in near-perfect condition, authenticated by top grading services, and accompanied by impeccable provenance. Because provenance transforms a coin from an object into a historical artifact, and a 1984 penny traced back to a sealed mint bag, an original roll, or a long-held collection assembled before the era was widely known carries an aura of authenticity that money cannot easily buy, and when such a coin enters the market, especially through a high-profile auction, competitive bidding among elite collectors can drive prices far beyond traditional expectations, because at that level, the purchase is not just about owning a coin. It is about securing a legacy, a conversation piece, and a symbol of dominance. Within the collecting world, and psychology plays a massive role here, because the 1984 penny is modern enough to feel familiar to millions of people, making the idea of finding one emotionally powerful, yet rare enough in its most extreme forms to remain elusive, creating a sense of hope that fuels constant searching, and that hope keeps demand alive year after year. Because every ordinary 1984 penny becomes a potential lottery ticket in the imagination of the finder, and history supports this mindset, because many legendary coins were discovered decades after their creation, often by accident, often by people who were not initially looking for treasure, and as long as the possibility of undiscovered varieties remains, the story of the 1984 no-mint mark penny continues to evolve, and speculation itself becomes part of the value. Because collectors are willing to pay premiums for coins that might later be recognized as unique or historically significant, and as we reflect on this remarkable coin, it becomes clear that its true power lies not just in copper and zinc, but in the fragile intersection of human error, mechanical imperfection, historical timing, and relentless curiosity. And the next time you see a simple 1984 penny without a mint mark, remember that within that ordinary piece of change lies a story of mistakes that became miracles. And a reminder that sometimes the smallest coins can carry the biggest dreams. Next, 1975 no-mint mark 1 cent USA coin, a penny struck at the Philadelphia Mint that under extremely rare and specific circumstances has been linked to breathtaking valuations reaching as high as $25 million, a number so shocking that it forces us to slow down, take a breath, and truly understand how such a thing could even be possible. Because on the surface the 1975 penny looks completely ordinary, millions upon millions were produced, spent, dropped into jars, lost in couches, and forgotten in drawers, yet hidden within that massive population exists a microscopic number of coins born from moments of error, confusion, mechanical failure, and human oversight, and those moments are exactly where legends are made in the world of numismatics, because value does not come from perfection alone but from imperfection captured at precisely the wrong time in precisely the wrong way. And the year 1975 is especially important in U.S. mint history because it falls during a turbulent era of rising metal costs, aging minting equipment, high production pressure, and evolving quality control standards, all of which created an environment where extraordinary mistakes could and did occur. And when we say no mint mark, we are referring to coins struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which at that time produced an enormous volume of cents without identifying marks, meaning that rarity would never be obvious at first glance, and that invisibility is part of what makes the story so compelling, because the most valuable 1975 pennies do not announce themselves loudly, they hide their secrets in weight, strike, metal composition, microscopic design details, and subtle but powerful deviations from what should exist, and one of the most legendary and valuable possibilities associated with the 1975 no-mint mark penny involves off-metal strikes. Because during the mid-1970s the mint was still producing solid copper pennies while simultaneously striking other denominations using different metal compositions, and although strict procedures existed to prevent planchets from mixing, history has proven that wrong blanks occasionally slipped through, resulting in pennies struck on planchets intended for other coins or even on experimental alloy blanks never officially acknowledged. And a genuine 1975 penny struck on a wrong planchet would immediately contradict official mint records, and coins that challenge documentation are among the most prized. objects in the collecting world, because they force historians to reconsider what they thought was settled fact, and such coins often exist as one-of-a-kind or nearly one-of-a-kind survivors, making them priceless to elite collectors who seek uniqueness above all else. And beyond off-metal eras, there are doubled die varieties that elevate the 1975 penny into legendary territory. Because true doubled dies created during the hubbing process leave strong, raised, sharply defined doubling in the date, lettering, and Lincoln's portrait, and unlike mechanical doubling, these errors are permanent features of the die itself, producing coins that display unmistakable duplication that cannot be erased or replicated. And while minor doubled dies exist across many years, bold and dramatic doubled dies from 1975 are extremely rare. And when such a coin is found in pristine uncirculated condition with original red luster intact, it becomes a cornerstone piece capable of commanding extraordinary sums, especially when it ranks as the finest known example, because at the highest level of collecting, condition becomes a weapon, separating merely rare coins from legendary ones, and die breaks and retained cut errors add another layer of intrigue, because as dies wear out from striking hundreds of thousands of coins, cracks form and pieces of the die can break away, leaving raised blobs, lines, and distortions on the coin's surface, and some late-stage die break errors from the 1970s are massive, visually dramatic, and unmistakable, transforming Lincoln's face or the surrounding lettering into surreal shapes that make the coin instantly recognizable. And when such an error occurs late in the die's life and only a small number of coins are struck before the die is replaced, those coins become instant rarities, and when one survives in mint state condition, untouched by circulation, its value multiplies dramatically, because it represents both rarity and preservation, two forces that together create exponential value, and strike through errors further deepen the mystery, where grease, cloth fibers, metal shavings, or other foreign material interfere with the strike, leaving missing details, ghostly impressions, or unusual textures that tell a silent story of chaos inside the mint. And while many strike-throughs are minor, extreme examples that dramatically alter the coin's appearance while preserving sharp underlying details are highly prized, especially when they can be clearly identified as mint-caused rather than post-strike damage. And then there is the ever-present possibility of experimental or undocumented compositions, because the 1970s were a period of intense concern over copper prices, and although the official composition change did not occur until the early 1980s, testing and experimentation often precede public announcements by years. And if even a single 1975 penny were struck on an experimental alloy that never made it into official records, its existence would represent one of the most important discoveries in modern U.S. numismatics, instantly elevating it into the realm of museum-grade artifacts and justifying valuations that reach into the tens of millions. And this is where the $25 million figure enters the conversation, not as a common price, not as a guarantee, but as a peak valuation for the most extraordinary example imaginable, the kind of coin that combines extreme rarity, dramatic visual impact, flawless condition, verified authenticity, and impeccable provenance, because provenance is everything at the highest level, and a coin with a documented history tracing back to a sealed mint bag, an original government source, or a long-held private collection assembled before the era was widely known carries a level of trust that cannot be manufactured later. And when such a coin appears at a major auction, competition among ultra-wealthy collectors can push prices far beyond traditional expectations, because at that level the purchase is not about investment alone, it is about legacy, prestige, and the desire to own something that no one else can. And psychology plays an enormous role in this market, because the 1975 penny is modern enough to feel familiar, making the dream of discovery emotionally powerful, yet old enough to carry historical weight, creating a perfect balance that fuels imagination and hope, and that hope keeps people searching, because every jar of pennies, every inherited collection, every forgotten roll becomes a potential treasure chest, and history has repeatedly shown that legendary coins often emerge decades after their creation, discovered by chance rather than intention, and as long as the possibility of undiscovered varieties remains, the story of the 1975 no-mint mark penny continues to grow, and speculation itself becomes part of the value. Because collectors are willing to pay premiums for coins that might later be recognized as unique or historically significant, and global demand adds another powerful force, because American coins are collected worldwide, and international collectors often bring new capital and intense competition into the market, especially for iconic era coins that represent moments of failure within one of the world's most advanced minting systems. And when all of these forces converge, rarity, error, condition, provenance, symbolism, psychology, and competition, the result is a valuation landscape where a 1-cent coin can legitimately be discussed in the same breath as $25 million. And as we reflect on this remarkable story, it becomes clear that the true value of the 1975 no-mint mark penny lies not just in copper, but in the fragile intersection of human imperfection and historical timing. And the next time you hold a simple 1975 penny in your hand, remember that within that small circle of metal lies the possibility of mistakes that became miracles, and a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest fortunes are hidden in the smallest places, waiting patiently for someone curious enough to look closer. Next, 1987 no-mint mark 1-cent USA coin, a penny struck at the Philadelphia Mint that under extremely rare and specific circumstances has been linked to staggering valuations reaching as high as $24 million, a number so shocking that it immediately raises questions, curiosity, and excitement, because how could a penny from the late 20th century, something many people alive today have spent without a second thought, possibly be worth more than luxury homes, supercars, and even priceless works of art? And the answer lies not in fantasy but in a powerful combination of minting errors, transitional era challenges, microscopic anomalies, collector psychology, and the relentless human desire to own what should never have existed, because the year 1987 occupies a very special place in U.S. coinage history. Sitting firmly within the copper-plated zinc era that began in 1982, a period when the United States Mint was still perfecting its processes, learning how layered metals behaved under extreme striking pressure, and managing massive production demands that left little room for careful inspection of every single coin. And when we say no mint mark, we are referring to the Philadelphia Mint, which produced an enormous number of pennies that year without a mint mark, creating the illusion of total commonness. Yet within that ocean of ordinary coins exists a microscopic number of extraordinary survivors born from moments of mechanical failure, human oversight, and pure chance, and those moments are exactly where legendary coins are created, because value in numismatics is not defined by age alone but by rarity multiplied by story multiplied by condition, and the 1987 no-mint mark penny has all three when the right error is present, and one of the most important and valuable possibilities associated with this coin involves dramatic double die averse errors. Because during the die hubbing process, misalignment can permanently imprint double design elements into the die itself, producing coins with crisp, raised duplication visible in the date, the word liberty, Lincoln's profile, or the motto "I in God we trust." And unlike common machine doubling, true double dies have depth, separation, and clarity that instantly signal authenticity to experienced collectors, and while minor double dies exist across many years, strong double dies from 1987 are exceptionally rare, and when such a coin is discovered in pristine mint state condition with full original luster and no signs of circulation, it becomes a cornerstone piece capable of commanding extraordinary premiums, especially if it ranks among the finest known examples, because at the highest level of collecting, condition becomes a multiplier so powerful that even small differences in preservation can translate into millions of dollars. And beyond double dies, there are off-metal strikes that elevate the 1987 penny into near mythical territory, because although copper-plated zinc planchets were standard by that time, the mint was striking multiple denominations simultaneously, and history has proven that wrong planchets occasionally slipped into cent presses, resulting in pennies struck on foreign blanks, experimental alloyed blanks, or planchets intended for other denominations, and a genuine 1987 penny struck on a wrong planchet would immediately contradict official mint records. And coins that contradict documentation are among the most valuable objects in numismatics. because they force experts to question what else might be missing from the historical record, and such coins are often one-of-a-kind or nearly one-of-a-kind survivors, making them irresistible to elite collectors who seek absolute uniqueness. And plating errors are another critical factor for this year, because copper-plated zinc cents introduced an entirely new category of defects, including missing copper layers, exposed zinc cores, bubbling, blistering, peeling, and uneven surfaces, and, while minor plating flaws are common and relatively inexpensive, extreme plating errors where large portions of copper are missing or dramatically malformed can become highly desirable when clearly caused by mint defects rather than environmental damage, and the most valuable examples are those that show dramatic visual impact while retaining sharp underlying detail, proving the error occurred during production and not after circulation, and die breaks and retained cut errors further expand the range of possibilities, because as dies wear down under constant high-speed striking, cracks form and pieces can break away, leaving raised blobs, lines, and distortions on the coin's surface, and some late-stage die break errors from the 1980s are massive and unmistakable, dramatically altering Lincoln's portrait or swallowing sections of lettering, turning the coin into an accidental work of abstract art. And when such an error occurs late in a die's life and only a small number of coins are struck before the die is retired, those coins become instant rarities, and when one survives in uncirculated condition, its value can rise exponentially, because it represents both scarcity and preservation, and strike-through errors add yet another layer of intrigue, where grease, debris, cloth fibers, or metal shavings interfere with the strike, leaving missing details, ghostly impressions, or unusual textures that capture a split second of chaos inside the mint. And while many strike-throughs are subtle, dramatic examples that significantly alter the design while maintaining sharp remaining details are highly prized, especially when combined with other errors, because compound errors are the ultimate trophies for advanced collectors. And then there is the ever-present possibility of undocumented or experimental compositions, because although the copper-plated zinc standard was firmly in place by 1987, experimentation and testing do not always align perfectly with public announcements, and if even a single 1987 penny were struck on an experimental alloy never officially released, its existence would represent a major numismatic discovery, instantly elevating it into museum-grade territory and justifying valuations that reach into the tens of millions. And this is where the $24 million figure comes into the discussion, not as a common value, not as a promise, but as a peak valuation for the most extraordinary example imaginable, a coin that combines extreme rarity, dramatic and undeniable mint error, flawless or near-flawless condition, verified authenticity by top grading services, and impeccable provenance, because provenance is everything at this level, and a coin with a documented history tracing back to a sealed mint bag, an original roll, or a long-held private collection assembled before the era was widely known carries a level of credibility that money alone cannot create. And when such a coin appears at auction, competition among ultra-wealthy collectors can drive prices far beyond traditional valuation models, because at that level the purchase is not about return on investment alone but about legacy, prestige, and the desire to own something no one else can, and psychology plays a massive role in this market, because the 1987 penny is modern enough to feel familiar to millions of people alive today, making the idea of discovery emotionally powerful, yet rare enough in its most extreme forms to remain elusive, creating a perfect balance of hope and mystery that fuels constant searching, and that hope keeps demand alive year after year, because every ordinary 1987 penny becomes a potential hidden treasure in the imagination of the finder, and history repeatedly supports this mindset, because many legendary coins were discovered decades after their creation, often by accident rather than deliberate searching, and as long as undiscovered varieties remain possible, the story of the 1987 no mint mark penny continues to grow, and speculation itself becomes part of the value, because collectors are willing to pay premiums for coins that might later be recognized as unique or historically significant, and global demand further amplifies this effect, because American-era coins are collected worldwide, and international buyers often bring fresh capital and intense competition into the market. especially for iconic modern errors that demonstrate the limits of even the most advanced minting systems. And when all of these forces converge, rarity, error, condition, provenance, symbolism, psychology, and competition, the result is a valuation landscape where a 1-cent coin can legitimately be discussed alongside numbers like $24 million. And as we reflect on this remarkable story, it becomes clear that the true value of the 1987 no-mint mark penny lies not just in copper and zinc but in the fragile intersection of human imperfection, mechanical complexity, and historical timing. And the next time you see a simple 1987 penny without a mint mark, remember that within that small circle of metal may lie a mistake powerful enough to rewrite a life, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest fortunes are hidden in the smallest, most ordinary places, waiting patiently for someone curious enough to look closer. Continuing this extraordinary journey across these 5 legendary 1-cent coins, it becomes clear that what binds the 1975 no-mint mark, 1978 no-mint mark, 1984 no-mint mark, 1987 no-mint mark, and 1999 1-cent USA coins together is not simply their face value or even their individual error types, but the powerful narrative of how modern American coinage, despite technological advances, remains vulnerable to human oversight, mechanical fatigue, and moments of chaos that can crystallize into objects of astonishing worth. Because when collectors speak about combined values reaching well over $100 million for these 5 pennies together, they are not speaking loosely, they are speaking from an understanding of how rarity compounds when multiple historically important era coins are viewed as a collective chapter in minting history rather than isolated accidents. And the mid-1970s through the late 1990s represent a period of enormous stress and transition for the United States Mint, beginning with solid copper compositions under rising metal prices, moving through experimentation and cost-cutting measures, and eventually settling into copper-plated zinc production under relentless public demand, and each of these 5 coins sits at a critical pressure point along that timeline, capturing a different kind of failure that tells a different part of the story. Because the 1975 no-mint mark penny reflects the vulnerability of solid copper production during a time of economic uncertainty and equipment where off-metal strikes, double dies, and massive die breaks could slip through when inspectors were overwhelmed, while the 1978 no-mint mark penny sits closer to the edge of compositional anxiety, a time when experimentation rumors, undocumented planchets, and late-stage die deterioration created fertile ground for legendary errors that still provoke debate today. And then the 1984 no-mint mark penny stands as one of the most visually famous error years of all, with its dramatic doubled-ear variety symbolizing how a single misaligned hubbing event can echo through history and turn an everyday object into a cultural icon, while the 1987 no-mint mark penny represents the maturing but still imperfect copper-plated zinc era, where plating failures, wrong planchets, and extreme die damage revealed that even standardized processes can break under sustained pressure. And finally, the 1999 penny marks the culmination of 20th century minting stress, a year driven by millennium demand, maximum output, and minimal tolerance for slowdown, where mule errors, off-metal strikes, and dramatic anomalies could occur during moments when speed overtook scrutiny. And when these 5 coins are discussed together, their combined narrative becomes exponentially more powerful, because collectors do not merely collect coins, they collect stories. And these 5 pennies together tell the story of how perfection is an illusion in mass production, and how those imperfections, when frozen in metal, become priceless. And another critical layer that elevates these coins collectively is the concept of survivorship, because errors are only valuable if they survive long enough to be discovered, authenticated, and preserved, and pennies are among the most abused and discarded objects in circulation, meaning that the survival rate for pristine error cents is astonishingly low, and this is why mint-state examples dominate the top end of valuation discussions, because a dramatic error that survives decades without circulation damage is statistically extraordinary, and when one considers the probability of a major error occurring, then surviving inspection, then entering circulation or storage, then avoiding damage, and finally being discovered by someone knowledgeable enough to recognize its significance, The odds become almost incomprehensible, and rarity on that level transcends normal market logic, because it is not repeatable. And when you combine 5 such coins, each representing a different failure point in the minting process, the collective rarity becomes almost mythological. And this is where elite collectors and institutions begin to think not in terms of individual purchases but in terms of assembling a legacy collection, because owning one of these coins is impressive. But owning multiple coins from this legendary group is a statement, and statements drive competition, and competition drives prices into the tens of millions, and provenance again becomes a unifying force, because when coins from these 5 years can be traced to original rolls, sealed bags, or collections formed before era knowledge became widespread, they form a chain of credibility that reassures buyers at the highest level, and reassurance is priceless when millions of dollars are involved. And psychology plays an enormous role when these coins are viewed together, because they span a range of years that many people remember personally, creating an emotional bridge between everyday life and unimaginable wealth, and that emotional bridge fuels the dream that anyone, anywhere, might still discover one of these coins in an old jar, a forgotten drawer, or an inherited collection, and that dream sustains demand not only for confirmed era coins but for the entire category, keeping prices strong and attention high. And when global collectors enter the picture, the effect multiplies again, because American era cents are seen internationally as symbols of industrial might meeting human fallibility, and that theme resonates across cultures, attracting buyers who may not even collect coins traditionally but who understand the power of owning a unique historical anomaly. And when these 5 coins are discussed in auction rooms, private negotiations, and collector forums, they are often spoken of in the same breath. Not because they are identical, but because together they represent a golden era of modern era collecting, a period unlikely to ever be repeated in the same way, because technology, documentation, and oversight continue to evolve, making such dramatic and undocumented failures increasingly rare, and that realization adds urgency, because collectors know that opportunities like this do not last forever, and urgency drives decisive, aggressive buying behavior. And as years pass and more coins are locked away in permanent collections or institutions, availability shrinks further, pushing values even higher. And when you step back and look at the combined legend of these 5 pennies, it becomes clear that their worth is not just measured in dollars but in what they represent, proof that even in a world obsessed with efficiency and control, chance still has the power to intervene, and that intervention can transform the smallest unit of currency into an object capable of changing lives. And as this story continues to unfold, with new discoveries, new research, and new collectors entering the field, the combined narrative of the 1975, 1978, 1984, 1987, and 1999 1-cent coins will only grow stronger, reinforcing the idea that sometimes history hides its greatest treasures not in vaults or museums, but in plain sight, disguised as something ordinary, waiting quietly for the right moment and the right person to recognize its true value.